Thanks very much, Concordia and Deputies. An important pillar of government policy is to ensure that the horse and greyhound racing industries achieve their maximum potential and, in doing so, contribute to economic and social development over a wide geographic distribution. The horse and greyhound racing industries make a valuable contribution, as we know, to a balanced regional economy. It is estimated that the thoroughbred industry has an annual economic impact of €1.84 billion, with direct and indirect employment of some 29,000 people, and then that the greyhound sector benefits an estimated 10,000 people economically. The thoroughbred industry in particular Concordia, brings a high level of international investment also into Ireland. Government funding, in addition to supporting these key industries, presents an excellent opportunity to yield a high return on its investment, leading to a flow right through the economy, thereby providing widespread benefits to our society. Support for certain strategic industries is important for future economic growth and can provide widespread benefits for our society as well as for our economy. The Irish equine breeding and racing industry is extremely competitive at an international level. It is a real beacon for excellence. We are the third biggest producer of thoroughbred foals in the world, and estimates place Ireland only behind the United States as the biggest seller of bloodstock by auction globally. This government acknowledges the importance of these industries and has supported them through legislation and policy initiatives. The support provided by public funds through investment in these industries has enabled Ireland to develop a world-class reputation for excellence in horse racing, greyhound racing and breeding. Thanks to the hard work and exceptional support of the Irish people for the vaccination programme, the Government continues the gradual reopening society, as we know, Concordia, and since the 22nd of October last, following the easing of COVID restrictions and in line with the strategy of reframing the challenge continuing our recovery and connecting, full attendances have been allowed at outdoor events. This situation is being kept under review too. The horse and greyhound racing industries receive financial support from the State through the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund under Section 12 of the Horse and Greyhound Racing Act 2001. My department makes payments from the fund to Horse Racing Ireland and to Con-Éireann. In the period 2001 to date, a total of €1.46 billion has been paid from the fund to the horse and greyhound racing industries in accordance with the provisions of the Act. The cumulative upper limits on payments from the fund provided for under the relevant legislation has been reached. Exchequer support provided from the fund is crucial, as all of us will know, to the survival and continued development of the horse and greyhound racing industries. And in order to give effect to the provisions of Budget 2022, this cumulative upper limit, which I just mentioned, must be increased by regulation here in the Houses in the Dáil. The estimates for my department passed by both Houses as part of Budget 22 include an allocation of €88 million for the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund, and that's to be distributed in accordance with Section 12(6) of the Greyhound Racing Act 2001, with 80% going to HRI, which is €70.4 million, and 20% going to Con-Éireann, which is €17.6 million. In order to allow my department to provide the monies allocated in Budget 2022, it is necessary to comply with a technical requirement under Section 12(13) of the Horse and Greyhound Racing Act to increase the cumulative limit on the amount payable from the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund by €88 million to some €1.54 billion. This is achieved by way of the regulation submitted to this House today. The aggregate limit on the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund has been increased in this manner in 2004 and in 2009 to 2021 inclusive. The 2017 Deloitte report into the economic impact of Irish breeding and racing, commissioned by HRI, indicates that the total direct and stimulated expenditure of the Irish greyhound breeding and racing industry is estimated at €1.84 billion in 2016. In addition, it is estimated that there are 15,200 jobs at the core of the racing and breeding industry, or in directly related industries. Horse racing helps drive a balanced regional economy. It generates a very significant return to the rural economy in Ireland and a positive international profile for our country. Of course, behind all the facts and figures are the thousands of men and women who directly and indirectly make the Irish racing and breeding industry what it is today. While the COVID-19 pandemic has had a major impact on all levels of the industry, particularly in the area of racecourses and attendances, the numbers of horses in training, owners, racers, fixtures and race numbers have all shown strong growth over the corresponding pre-pandemic figures for 2019. Figures published by HRI for the first 6 months of 2021 show horses in trading numbers, which is a key driver of rural employment for the industry, up 24% on last year's or on the comparable figure for 2019, with ownership up by almost 24%, and new owners registered showing a 31% increase in the 2019 figure. Very strong figures indeed. Turnover in 2021 is estimated to reach €154.7 million by the year end, which would be an increase of €48 million in 2020, but down €10.5 million on the pre-COVID pandemic year of 2019. HRI continues to engage with all racecourses to crystallise the losses incurred over the course of the pandemic. As proven in 2021 to date, Irish owners, trainers, jockeys and horses are setting standards globally, and their stellar achievements and enduring influence underscore Ireland's international prominence. The Irish equine breeding and racing industry is extremely competitive at a global level, despite other major racing nations having much larger populations and much larger economies. The importance of a strong welfare and integrity foundation to this highly successful industry is crucial, and this is well recognised throughout the industry. My department and I continue to work with HRI, the Irish Horse Racing Board and other relevant stakeholders to ensure the highest standards of integrity and welfare are maintained. In that regard, I am in receipt of the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Agriculture, Food and the Marines report on integrity in racing, which issued earlier this month. This followed a series of meetings with this forum involving officials from my department, from HRI, the Irish Horse Racing Regulatory Board and the Irish Racehorse Trainers Association over the summer. We are examining that report and I will fully consider its findings over the next short period of time as well. I thank the committee for its work under the chairmanship of Jackie Cahill for putting together such a comprehensive and important report. The EU and UK trade and cooperation agreement for Brexit reached in December of last year, which included the Northern Ireland Protocol, was a welcome development for all of us. But it should be noted that challenges remain, as we know, in relation to the movement of horses between Ireland and Britain and between Ireland and mainland Europe for those who are using the land bridge. The global nature of major breeding operations illustrates that while Ireland arguably now holds a leadership role within Europe, its pre-eminence is not guaranteed. According to the 2021 Power Report, and to touch on the issue of greyhounds, Corla, the industry supports considerable employment both directly and indirectly across the Irish economy. It's estimated that in 2019 the industry supported over 4,000 full-time and part-time jobs. In addition, there are over 6,000 active greyhound owners. The total number of people deriving economic benefit from the sector is estimated at over 10,000. The funding provided to this sector helps sustain a long-standing tradition, as the industry is part of the social fabric of our country. And this funding underpins economic activity in what are in many instances highly rural areas as well. The future of the industry is dependent on a strong governance platform and on the industry having the highest standards of integrity and welfare founded on a strong regulatory system. There is a strong commitment to improved animal welfare in this sector under the programme for government. My department, along with the sector itself, is committed to continuing to strengthen welfare standards in the greyhound industry, and future funding of the sector is contingent on welfare standards being upheld, and this is reflected in the annual parameters set out by my officials in their liaison with Con. Provisions in the Greyhound Racing Act 2019 came into effect on the 28th of May of that year and will make a real difference in this regard. This legislation strengthens the legal basis for the industry with a view to fortifying the integrity of the greyhound racing sector and improving provision for greyhound traceability. The new Act improves the governance of Con. strengthens regulatory controls in the industry, modernises sanctions and improves integrity within the sector. It provides the industry with the real tools with which it can effect fundamental change and reform. A key element of the new legislation is the provision for the first time of a full IT traceability system for racing greyhounds. The Con. traceability system came into operation on the 11th of January 2021. The system provides a mechanism to ensure that racing greyhounds are properly registered and traceable throughout their lives. The sections of the Act commenced on the 1st of October 2020 signal a new era for greyhound racing. They facilitate the board on focusing on its priority objective of achieving the highest standards of care and welfare of greyhounds. Further commencement orders to commence the majority of the outstanding sections are currently being drafted. The Greyhound Racing Act of 2019, when fully implemented, will enable RCE to ensure the important heritage associated with greyhound racing in Ireland can continue under the appropriate rules and regulations. The industry is predominantly a rural industry corridor with a strong urban support base. The COVID-19 crisis has, similar to other sectors of the economy, resulted in a collapse of commercial activity in the sector and a significant reduction in activity generally. Recovery of the industry will require ongoing support to aid restoration of normal levels of activity. Thank you.
Carthy, who's sharing with her colleague Deputy Martin Browne. Is that correct?
Our amendment also. The Irish horse and greyhound racing sectors are success stories that should be celebrated by people across Ireland, and they're sectors which should rightly be supported by government through direct financial measures. But there are, however, clear issues with how this fund is delivered. This was evidenced by the fact that the Joint Committee on Agriculture, Food and the Marine recently held numerous meetings further to allegations on animal welfare issues within the horse racing sector. The subsequent report of the committee acknowledged that while the vast majority of those in the sector operate to the highest international standards, there are practices and structures that could undermine public confidence. The Horse and Greyhound Fund has grown considerably over the years. The allocation in 2014 was €54 million compared to €88 million being proposed by the Minister today. By any standards, that is a huge sum of money, and it should be matched by absolute accountability and transparency. Put succinctly, if the Dáil is to expend nearly €90 million of taxpayers' monies, then we must have the full confidence that the funding is having the most beneficial impact for everyone involved in the sector and for the wider economy, and we must be clear that standards regarding animal welfare are above reproach. Until 2009, the amount of funding was linked directly to the betting tax, but the allocation is no longer calculated in such a manner. As such, the automatic 80-20 split between the horse and greyhound sectors is increasingly bizarre. For any sector, those seeking government funding have to outline exactly what they are planning to deliver with taxpayers' money. What will be the day-to-day costs? What will be spent on infrastructure or strategic development goals? How is the success of the spending to be measured? When it comes to this fund, however, the Minister would have us believe that the best return every single year would come from an exact 80-20 division between two organisations. Surely logic would dictate that there would be some variance in either directions, as both organisations seek to develop their sectors at different times. Sinn Féin's concerns regarding the efficacy of these funds are laid bare by a simple glance at the HRI allocation and prize money in any year, normally only within a percentage or two of any difference. And where does this prize money end up? If we look at the awards over the past 3 years, we see that the same small number of elite trainers are raking in the bulk of the fund. In 2019, against an allocation of €67 million, HRI had a prize fund of €66 million, of which breeders only received €385,000. At the same time, the single most successful horse race trainer received €7,792,083, nearly 10% of the entire fund across both the horse and greyhound racing. And no disrespect to them, but I'm not convinced that that particular trainer needs any more of an incentive from the taxpayer to be involved in the sector. At the same time, we have the backbone of Irish horse racing, those involved in the horse and pony racing, who are crying out for small amounts of funding merely to survive. And from speaking to many breeders and others involved in the greyhound sector, they similarly report that they don't see the benefits of the substantial state funding. So again, Sinn Féin fundamentally agree with providing investment to both the horse and greyhound racing sectors. We're just not convinced that this or previous governments have done enough and done so in the manner suited to ensure that the funding benefits the largest number of people across the length and breadth of the sectors and rural Ireland more broadly. Equally, we're not convinced that the Minister has taken adequate oversight of the fund generally. And we're certainly not convinced that government has seen to it that the safeguards are put in place, not just to ensure animal welfare standards are met, but in the light of this significant investment that we're recognised as setting the global standard. And that is why we're asking government to accept our amendment that the Minister conduct a full review of the social and economic impact of the fund that includes an examination as to whether the current manner in which the fund is distributed is the most appropriate to deliver the greatest benefit to the largest number of people across those sectors and the rural communities that depend on them, as well as ensuring that animal welfare standards and oversights are adequate and more so. Under the current model, I fear that the big lads will continue to get bigger and stronger, while most of those who are involved in these important sectors will see little benefit from the substantial taxpayer investment. This needs to change, and I hope and trust that the government will accept our amendment today.
Thank you. Deputy Martin Browne.
I fully support our horse and greyhound racing sectors. They contribute significantly to the identity and economy of my own constituency in Tipperary. Today we're talking about allocating 88 million to the fund. While it is less than the sum given last year, it still retains one-third of the funding increase given for 2021, which was unprecedented. So the fundamental question is whether the money is being administered correctly and if the public is being provided with total transparency in how their money is being dispersed and used. Unfortunately, I cannot say that I have been convinced by the discussions I have had as regards the administration of the fund or how effective it is in supporting the smaller operators across these sectors. And this is not just the point of view I have garnered from engaging with the Minister, the Department and the organisations concerned. It is something that is drawn to the attention of more CDs when the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund is due for discussion. There is a perception that the money that is given through this fund does not make its way down to the small operator. The total price fund for 2019 was 66 million, 1 million less than the money allocated for the same year when only 385,000 made its way to breeders that year. The impression this gives is the funding we're talking about ends up going into the pockets of the elite trainers rather than being spread in a more equitable manner throughout the industry. The horse and pony racing sector, for example, are saying that despite funding of this size going to the HRI, they are facing real financial problems. This matter was put to the Minister at last week's Committee on Agriculture. Unfortunately, he was unprepared to give any commitment to addressing this. If the funding that we're talking about here today is not making its way down to the smaller operators, then is it really being used effectively? Is it really being used for the benefit of the industry from start to finish? There was also the 80-20 split in funding between horse racing Ireland and greyhound racing. Despite repeated questioning on the matter, we are never told why this ratio has never changed. It is hardly as though year on year this split accurately reflects the needs of one body against the other. It just can't be. It is hardly as if the needs of both sides never change. Last year we were asked to increase funding significantly. Now we've been asked to approve funding of 88 million for 2022, which is 10% higher than it was only 5 years ago. Yet there is no explanation as to why the justified increase for both sectors continue to stand at exactly 80-20. There are huge shortcomings here in terms of transparency. The public needs to know where their money is going, what it's being used for, and have a full account of how worthwhile their contribution has been. Welfare issues have come to the fore in both sectors in recent times, and I am convinced that the vast majority of those involved in the sector treat their animals in line with the highest of animal welfare standards. I regularly see the dedication that local operators in my own area in Tipperary have for their animals. The issue I have is the level of transparency that the public is given in terms of the measures that HRI and GRI are taking in ensuring animal welfare obligations are fulfilled and effective. At last week's Agriculture Committee, I asked if the Department audited all of the welfare commitments given by the two organisations ahead of approving funding, and for the level at which they have lived up to their commitments. In response, I was given assurances and some expenditure figures, and was just told of metrics. These metrics don't measure welfare. Telling the public that the metrics suggest all possible is being done will not comfort those who have seen dreadful reports relating to both sectors over recent times. We need to know the real benefits made, how the welfare of animals has improved, and for a full account of how this success has been measured, not just a financial balancing act when new funding is on the horizon. Minister, I fully support the horse and greyhound sector, and that is why I and my party support the provisions of funding to these sectors. But as I outlined, I have concerns at the way this fund is being administered and how effective each euro is being spent. That is why Sinn Féin has tabled an amendment to deal with these concerns. Our support for this bill is contingent on this amendment being accepted and acted upon. We ask that a full review of the exchequer funding to the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund be conducted with a view of examining the social and economic impact of the fund. This would include the efficacy of the fund in supporting the development of both sectors and the many people involved in them throughout our rural communities. This review would also examine whether the use of the grant to subsidise prize funds represent best value for money. It would also examine the effectiveness of the fund in ensuring the highest levels of animal welfare standards. If these amendments are adopted, then the findings of this review would be reported to the Dáil within 6 months. I don't believe there is anything in these amendments that anybody could possibly take an issue with. If anything, they seek to benefit the two sectors by ensuring that the funding is used effectively and for the benefit of the industries as a whole and for the animals involved. All of us here have a duty to ensure that the money being given to this industry on the public's behalf is used effectively to ensure it has the social, economic and welfare benefits that we all want to see.
Thank you very much, Deputy Browne. Deputy Alan Kelly.
Look, and before I begin, I just want to put on record, I have a small interest in a racing greyhound myself. For many people in this sport, this is a sport of working class people. It is a sport whereby it has gone on from generation to generation. The vast majority of people in both of these industries have contributed hugely locally, socially, and also look after their animals, whether it's in horse racing or in greyhound racing. I do feel that, having spoken to quite a many of them, given the county I live in, you turn around to turn every corner, but they do feel that the equity of the distribution of this fund is really something that needs to be looked at, particularly as regards the volume of funding that goes down to small operators. It's a real issue now. And Minister, if there's one thing I would ask you to consider, if you got off the phone there for a second, is that you would look at the equity of the distribution of the fund as regards how it gets into the hands of smaller operators as opposed to big operators who, as previous speakers have spoken, don't need it. Certainly don't need it proportionately. But animal welfare is a serious issue in both codes, and we must have a zero-tolerance approach to any abuse of animals, either in sport or on farms or in homes, unacceptable in this day and age. But on the subject of the motion, the funds provided support to very indigenous industries to provide huge employment across rural Ireland and give much enjoyment to people. A GRI report showed that it supported 4,150 full-time and part-time jobs in 2019. Last year, a total of 96 million was allocated under the fund, and of that, 76.8 went to horse racing in Ireland and 19.2 to GRI. Budget 2020 allocates a figure of 88 million, which is obviously 8 million lower. A ratio is used to allocate the fund, and 80% or 70.4 million will go to horse racing, and 20% 17.6 million to greyhound racing. Of this allocation, a minimum of 10% is to be spent on welfare. Not more than 60% must be applied to prize money, not more than 3% on operational grants to private tracks, and not more than 27% on regulatory and administration costs and other statutory functions of GRI. It is critical that the 10% ring fence in 2021 for welfare initiatives is maintained, and I would ask to look at that it be increased into the future, Minister. Can you confirm to the House that you are confident that this funding is spent in the proper way? I also raised this last year, and that a greyhound trust needs to be set up. The volume of greyhounds that need to be rehoused remains high. There is only one centre, and I've raised this on multiple occasions in committee, in Public Accounts Committee and in here. In my view, there needs to be 15 to 20, and work needs to be done on that very quickly. People must be able to see progress so they can see that this issue is being dealt with appropriately and be in a position to support the industry as a result. Your department last year also allocated record funding of 3.2 million to over 100 animal welfare charities separate to these funds, and I'd ask you to provide clarity on what the allocation will be next year. Many proposals have been put to the Minister and GRI from people who work with greyhounds, and I hope their voices will be heard. We also need to ensure that, from an industry point of view, that many of the race courses out there don't end up being liquidated, Minister, because of the way in which the current funding is set up. It's perilly dangerous that this is going to be the case. I also, in my last minute, want to raise two other issues. In horse racing in particular, too many people aren't paid enough. They're badly paid. And really, we believe, given the legislation that my colleague Jed Nash has brought in, and which is used again in the last number of days here in Ireland, we need a sectoral employment order for people working in the industry. This is something that we will push and push and push, that across this major industry, those who love horses, love the sector, but they should be respected, their expertise should be respected, and they should be paid appropriately and consistently. And I would urge you to do that. And finally, it won't be strange to you to know again that I'm going to raise the issue of gambling addiction and how, as a country, we need to look at a ban on gambling advertising. The proliferation of gambling advertising that has been put forward by my colleague through legislation and how to deal with it, Senator Mark Wall, this really does need to be dealt with, and dealt with quickly. It's obscene and disgusting, the amount of ads that are now all over the place when it comes to watching sport and television. I sit down all the time regularly with my daughter, who is 11 years of age, and all she's seen is gambling ads all morning, noon and night. It's wrong, and it needs to be dealt with quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Kelly. Deputy Jennifer Whitmore.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. Unfortunately, Minister, it appears that this year that your government is still continuing its devotion to supporting a deeply problematic greyhound industry. And I think what I find really interesting listening to the speeches here tonight is that you're not alone. Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and the Greens are not alone in this. You're actually joined by Sinn Féin and by Labour in their support of this very, very concerning industry, and the government continuing year on year to prop it up. Despite the overarching concerns of standards of care and the loss-making nature of the industry, it is impossible to understand why the government continues to fund and continues to increase state funding year on year to this. Between 2001 and 2020, over €260 million of public money was given to the commercial greyhound industry. 260 million. There are sports clubs, community pitches, animal welfare organisations that could never, ever hope to get money like that. And I heard one of the speakers earlier on talking about how the greyhound industry is part of Ireland's identity and Ireland's culture. It is certainly not part of my Irish identity. It's certainly not part of my working class heritage and background, or of anyone else that I would have grown up with, or anyone in my party. The majority of people in Ireland do not want to see this funding continued. When we look at the 260 million, if we compare that to 1.5 million in the budget for animal welfare organisations, and that's actually double what it used to be, it's less than 10% what the greyhound industry gets. In 2019, the Irish Guide Dogs for the Blind received 886,000 from the state. They had to actually go out and raise 5 million themselves. Can anyone say that the public money would not have been better off spent on guide and assistance dogs? But your government prioritised greyhound racing instead. There is an issue of the state propping up this industry, and often and over again jobs are used as a justification. So what I would say to you, Minister, and to your government is have some vision when it comes to rural Ireland and these communities, and actually create jobs that benefit the entire community, that benefit our wildlife, benefit ecotourism. Don't target an industry that's on its last legs, essentially, an industry that is finding it very difficult to get the support, except from government. You know, actually have a vision for something productive, something positive for rural Ireland, rather than just doing the same thing year on year. You're stuck in a rut with this. You're funding it because every year you've always funded it, and each year you give a little bit extra. And if you don't, there's a few very vocal voices that will be out complaining. But actually have a vision for rural Ireland to make sure that people can actually see the benefits of that 260 million. There has been a catalogue of appalling practices and declining public support for this industry. The Irish Greyhounds Board's own anti-doping and medication review, published in 2016, found that there was long-standing and significant deficiencies in policies, processes and implementations that have been undermining the integrity and reputation of greyhound racing in Ireland. Another IGB document conducted by Preferred Results in 2017 stated that the industry in Ireland was not focused on the sport of greyhound racing but on breeding, and that it was failing from both a commercial and a regulatory point of view. And yet your government and previous governments and the opposition continue to support it, continue to say, let's give them money. I can't fathom, like 2021, and this is where, you know, you think this is where taxpayers' money should be going. There's only 8 countries in the world that allow greyhound racing. The industry is closing, or near to closing, in Mexico. It's banned in all but 5 states in the US, and it's significantly contracting in Britain, and yet here we're propping it up. Well, you're propping it up. Minister, I'd say to you, the public do not want their money spent on supporting this industry. There are so many other better ways to spend this money. State funding has enabled this financial basket case, animal welfare issues and overbreeding practices. Governments have insulated the industry from commercial reality and allowed the Greyhound Board to ignore public opinion. Without the annual injection of millions of public money, this industry would have had to rapidly reform or collapse. Instead, money granted by this and successive governments has propped up a failed industry, and an industry that continues to fail the animals it exploits. And I'm going to finish off with a quote, because I know Fine Gael are great and Fianna Fáil are great at their quotes. Joe Biden said, "Don't tell me what you value, show me your budget and I'll tell you what you value." Now, I'll expand that beyond yourselves. I'll say this to Sinn Féin and Labour. You know, what will you spend money on if you get into government? Will you continue to fund the greyhound industry? Will you give it more money than what this government is giving? Because I think you need to get that on the record and make it absolutely blatantly clear to the voters out there where your priorities lie. Thank you.
Deputy Whitmore, thank you. Now Deputy Paul Murphy sharing with Deputy Mick Barry. Yeah.
I have to say it is striking how out of touch the majority of politicians in this House are with public opinion. On the central issue of animal cruelty, it's clear that the point has just been made by Deputy Whitmore. It's not just the government, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and shamefully the Greens, but also Sinn Féin and the Labour Party, which support handing over significant public money to the horse and greyhound racing industry. Since we dealt with this last year, and this is obviously an annual event, we've seen the appalling spectacle of prominent racehorse trainer Gordon Elliott posing for a photo, sitting on top of the dead body of a horse. Another glimpse of the casual cruelty behind the airbrushed image of the horse racing industry. Once again, we're going to see huge money, 17.6 million for 2022, being given to the greyhound industry. And nobody can pretend not to see and not to be aware of the widespread cruelty which is well documented within greyhound racing. It is an unavoidable point behind the industry which Deputy Carthy described as a success story that should be celebrated. It's 2 years since RT Investigates exposed that the industry was breeding 10 times as many puppies as it needs, and up to 6,000 dogs a year were being killed because they're not fast enough. We know that greyhounds are exported to places with few, if any, animal welfare standards, and there are horrific stories of dogs being mistreated, boiled alive in many cases. There's a very deep cruelty involved in all of this. I want to make a brief point and make a call in relation to hare coursing, that we need to have full clarity in terms of what happened in relation to the Loughrea Coursing Club, which had its licence suspended indefinitely. When I asked for the post-mortem on the deaths of the hares in a parliamentary question, I didn't get an answer to that. We need full clarity on all of that. And the basic point, which I think the vast majority of the public would agree on, is that we would be far better off, for example, doubling the funding to the Health and Safety Authority by taking the funding away from the greyhound racing industry. That's the choice that the government makes, not to fund many very worthwhile things and instead invest in an industry which is unsustainable and which is based on animal cruelty.
Deputy Mick Barry.
So, the House has been told by Deputy Carthy that the greyhound industry is a success story that should be celebrated. I don't agree with that. Deputy Kelly from the Labour Party says that he has a small interest in a racing greyhound. Both deputies have voiced their support for animal welfare, but ignore the fact that animal cruelty is at the heart of the greyhound industry. in this country. If the average age of a racing dog is 2.5 to 3 years, what happens when the dog is too old? What happens when the dog is injured? What happens if the dog is too slow? RT Investigates answered that question in their programme. Nearly 6,000 dogs slaughtered in the year 2017 alone. Now, this is a declining industry. Attendance fell 55% between 2008 and 2018. The tracks lost €30 million since 2019. Red Sea asked across a section of people whether they felt that the state should continue to fund the industry. Only 16% said yes. The industry is being kept alive by state funding and state sponsorship. 17.6 million for the next year, 310 million since the inception of the fund. I'll give you a suggestion on how the fund could be better spent. The fund is basically the state's take from gambling on these two industries, handed back to the two industries. Incredible, 1.5 billion since the inception of the fund. It tells you something about the scale of gambling in this country. So rather than give the money back to industries that thrive on gambling, why not give monies to people who suffer from addiction? It's a huge issue in this country. 50,000 people severely affected by gambling addiction, 200,000 people at risk of gambling addiction. I would put it to the House that that's a far better way to spend some of those monies than handing back to the industry, including the Greyhound industry, which has animal cruelty at its core. It's not incidental, it's at its core, and deputies shouldn't be covering up for that.
Deputy Lowry.
Minister, the horse racing industry in Ireland is respected both nationally and internationally. Our racing and breeding activity is amongst the most prominent and respected in the world. The core breeding and racing industry in Ireland is estimated to generate a staggering €1 billion in gross expenditure. This figure in turn provides an input of €914 million to our economy. In recent years, Ireland was second only to the US as the biggest seller by value of bloodstock at public auctions. We bred more than 20% of the top 100 flat horses in the world. The industry directly supports up to 10,000 jobs, while indirectly it supports many thousands more in areas such as equine science and veterinary services, farriers, transporters and stable staff. Those who work on and off course betting, those who maintain and service our racetracks, and others providing a multitude of services. The Irish economy cannot withstand the loss or reduction of such revenue. Now more than ever, we need to promote our assets and attractions on the world stage. Horse racing in Ireland is a key attraction for tourists. Our reputation in the industry means that race meetings held in Ireland are popular with both Irish and overseas visitors. They in turn generate revenue for our hotels, our guest houses, our pubs and restaurants, and for the local businesses in the area. The contribution made by horse racing to the economy, to tourism and to the image of Ireland can never be underestimated. In recent months, the industry was embroiled in a smear campaign that cut to the very heart of Irish horse racing. Fabricated allegations of doping ran rampant across the horse racing fraternity. Poisonous darts were thrown at the industry with the clear intention of causing as much mayhem and damage as possible. The fallout was felt by everyone involved in the industry. It placed everyone in the spotlight. People felt fingers pointing at them. No one was named, so no one was said to be guilty. And because no one was named, everyone was seen to be guilty. This had a devastating impact on the men and women working at all levels in the industry. Even the most seasoned and well-known names publicly spoke out about the crushing effect of the rumours. Everyone felt the long finger of suspicion pointing in their direction. Everyone felt guilty until proven innocent. It caused anguish and animosity. On the 8th of July this year, the IHRB Disciplinary Committee having carried out extensive investigations, reported that they had taken 2,500 samples. 72% of these samples were taken on the racecourse and at point-to-point meetings. The remaining 28% were taken as part of an out-of-competition testing programme. The IHRB stated that the vast majority of results were negative. In fact, of the 2,500 test samples taken this year, 10 adverse analytical findings were confirmed. Not one of these involved horse racing Ireland. Damage has been done to the industry in recent months. I have no tolerance for rumour and innuendo. Facts speak, but rumours cause destruction. Suggestions leave a trail of damage that can destroy innocent people. The Agricultural Committee supports the testing system currently in place, and I support their stance on this. I also support their call for a review of the system to ensure that Ireland's procedures match international best practice. Equally, I agree with the Committee's recommendation that the Department consider developing a testing capacity in Ireland that builds national expertise in testing. It is a welcome move by HRI to provide funding to the IHRB for the installation of CCTVs in stable yards at Irish racecourses. Such measures form part of their agreement to maintain the integrity of horse racing. The provision of funding for this is crucial in protecting the industry. It cannot be delayed. There is no one foolish enough to think that high-value sports are not open to misconduct. However, if an individual has reason to suspect or has definitive knowledge that rules are being broken, they are obliged to make their information known to the proper authorities. Chinese whispers are not the way to deal with any situation. Casting aspersions to the media is not a responsible way to deal with a matter that has the potential to cause widespread damage. This form of commentary threatens the horse racing industry and also threatens the reputations of sports governing bodies. All sports ministers are open to malpractice. Vigilance is required at all times to ensure that the field of competitive sports remains level. Those who choose to withhold factual evidence are as guilty as those who break the rules, and they too must be held accountable. The integrity of the sport of horse racing must be protected.
Thank you, Deputy Lowry. Now we have Deputy Collins sharing with Deputy Healy-Raes. Both.
Yeah, absolutely. Minister, I fully welcome this bill and support this. Maybe something who says I do support what you put before us, but this is very welcome. And it, helps to support the horse and the greyhound industry. Industries that either directly or indirectly create 39,000 jobs. And that's a huge amount of jobs that we have to, in this country, support and make sure that they are secure going forward. I do sincerely hope, Minister, that monies like this will make its way down along the chain as such, that it's not at the very top that the rich and the wealthy horse owners end up getting most of this money, that it works its way down to the ordinary people that I see out my own communities out there that love their horses and race their horses and there during different times of the year along places like Drimoleague and Doris and Goleen and Bandon and places like that. So I'd like to make sure, and maybe you could acknowledge that money is going to make its way through down to the ordinary people. A lot of the opposition to this bill is coming here from the people both for profit and the Social Democrats. And I'd like to know, have they ever visited those who care for their greyhounds? And I did myself. I visited Collins's farm there in Church Cross some time back. The immaculate way and the beautiful way that these animals are cared for inside needs to be commended top class. And I think if these deputies decided, instead of coming in here opposing this, go out there and see these places, they'd certainly see firsthand the fine way these dogs are being treated, and greyhounds are being treated from early age to elder age.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Good to see you back again in action. Minister, I want to thank you, first of all, for giving the 88 million. And the only regret I have is that there's a reduction of 8 million from last year. And we all know that the cost of everything is going up. And I'm only wondering, why do we have to come in here every year and approve this? Shouldn't there be a standing order that horse racing and the greyhound industry, Greyhound Racing Ireland, that they get their money every year because they return it back to the coffers in abundance, you know, after, you know, the year when they provide the racing, the horse racing, they say 29,000 jobs, and the doggy people, 12,000 people, you know, are working and working very hard. And you know, with their dogs, and they treat them very well. And it was sad that, yes, they did, that the industry did get a bit of a bad name there for a while because of some few rogues. But the whole 99% of these people are genuine people, and they live for their dogs, and they live for their community, and they do make make a serious contribution to rural Ireland. Places like Guinea, Wicklow, Carthy, and then you go up to Scotland, Lynn and Cashel Island and North Kerry and over into Knocknagoshel and Brasted. The difference that you know, those people, the difference that it makes to those people is massive in all those areas.
Thank you, Deputy. Thank you very much, Councillor. I'd just like to say at the very beginning, it's very hard. Everybody's entitled to have their own say inside here, but to hear other deputies standing up and talking about cruelty in the sector, of course there are people who mightn't be right at any sector of life. But the vast majority of people who have greyhounds and who have dogs, they adore their dogs. If 'tis horses, they adore their horses. And they live for their animals, and they care for them and nurture them and want to protect them and mind them, and of course have sport with them, because that is what it is all about. But when it comes to the funding, I want to say publicly, I want money to be provided, but I want it to be used well. Greyhound Racing Ireland has to be forced, as a conditionality of funding, to engage proactively with all stakeholders. They can no longer be allowed to alienate the very people they were established to serve, the people who adore their dogs. For too long, this organisation has operated in a silo capacity and only willing to engage with anybody who did not query their operational objectives. This is wrong. The greyhound industry in Ireland has the capacity to be great. It was great, it can be great, and it will be great. But the current operating model is destroying the sector and protecting the elites. It is time, Minister, for you to intervene, to continue to give funding, but to ensure that the same levels of transparency, openness are to be found within the greyhound sector are as commonplace with horse racing Ireland. There must be absolute transparency and full accountability when it comes to state funding allocated to the horse and greyhound racing industries. It is terribly important. We all want to see our tracks continue. We want to ensure that they're there, but we want to ensure that the people who are the real important people, the people that I know, that I meet on a Friday and Saturday night in the racetrack in Tralee, who come with their vans and their trailers, and they have their dogs, they take them in for a race, and like I say, they don't just love their dogs, they adore their dogs. And for them to be at home tonight and to hear people inside in this house saying that, oh, well, cruelty is rampant, like that is wrong. It's an awful brush to cast upon a vast amount of people, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Deputy Fitzmaurice.
Thank you, Councillor, and I'd like to reiterate your welcome back. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to speak on this. First of all, I think when people talk about public opinion, there's more places than around Dublin. You get the public opinion right around the country, and I think what should be known near and wide is that there's people that breeds a horse that's for basically, and it might turn out good, and they might be farming a sheep or cattle or whatever, and what it does for them as a family that might know damn all about horses, it encourages them, and the same with greyhounds. So I think like this, we need to know what public opinion really is when we talk about it in here. Minister, I think there's a few low-hanging fruits in relation to our report. I would have outlined them before. I think when Minister Cavan was actually in government, we brought in the M system in cattle, and it was probably one of the best systems that ever came in for traceability. I think we should be looking at that for accountability in the horse sector. And I think it's one of the low-hanging fruits because the system is already there that we can go on. Also, Minister, the people that breeds horses in a small way, I think that we need to look at the likes of the TAMs or the CAP to be able to, you know, incorporate that into it. I know that under TAMs there was things for horses brought into it, but I don't think they were ever implemented. And I would ask you to look at that. Also, there's youngsters with ponies, and I think insurance is becoming a problem around the country, Minister. I know that, in fairness to you, you did say that you were going to look at it before, and I think that we have to think of them, because they'll start off as a youngster and move their way up along, and some will basically state it and some will never state it, but it's the enjoyment of it. In the line of the benefit of the sector, and indeed the Greyhound sector. Look at the Galway races; it's one of the best known racetracks. It's not alone the people that goes to the racing. Some people might never even look at a horse, but it's the off-spin in the hotels and the general money spent within the city. It's the economy you create in the different places. And Minister, in the line of the Greyhounds, the same thing. You know, a lot of people start off, they might buy one dog, and this myth about, no more than in every walk of life, there's going to be one or two people that won't do things right. But in fairness, 99% of people, 99.9% of them, will be doing it right. But you'll always get the high-profile programme that will basically castigate everyone or tear everyone with the one brush. I've seen people myself. I've seen people myself near me. And I'll tell you one thing, and the same thing, the same people are shouting about exports of cattle and all of this. To be honest about it, if I had as much room as an animal has that goes out of this country on a boat, Jesus, I'd nearly sleep in it on the broad of my back with the amount of room they get. But we have to be constantly trying to go against other types of society. And it's not a big number of people that actually are out there, but they make themselves very loud. In the line of the Greyhound sector, the one thing, Minister, I think we need to make sure is that we have an even balance of the Greyhound tracks right around the country to support the rural areas that are there at the moment. They've come through a torrid time in the line of with the COVID and with different restrictions, and it has been tough. And the other thing, Minister, the point-to-points. Last year there was a lot of pressure on them, because this is people that had breed a horse that if they win a point-to-point, it's basically the pricing or the value of their horse will be known. And for a while they were held up. I know it was under the different regulations or whatever that it couldn't go ahead. They did get going, but I would ask you to make sure that they're facilitated. But in the line of the report that we have done, I think, Minister, there's some low-hanging fruit. I would ask you to look at it and take those things, because we didn't in the committee go out to make it, do up a report for the sake of doing it. We went through it meticulously, in fairness to every TD that's on it, and we took time at it. We had many conversation at private meetings at it, and in fairness, I think that there is good stuff in it that you should implement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Fitzmaurice. Minister, to conclude.
Thank you very much, Concorla, and thanks to all the deputies for the wide-ranging contributions today as well. So to summarise, Concorda, in order to allow my department to provide the monies allocated in Budget 2022, it is necessary to comply with the technical requirement under Section 12(13) of the Horse and Greyhound Racing Act 2001 to increase the cumulative limit to beyond 1.54 billion or to 1.54 billion euro to accommodate the extra 88 million euro that we're allocating this year. One of the overarching objectives of the government is to ensure that the horse and greyhound racing industries achieve their maximum potential, and in so doing contribute to the economic and social development across the country. And that's very much reflected in our programme for government commitments as well. The government strongly supports these sports and the industry surrounding them, and have underpinned them through legislation and policy initiatives over a long period of time. And the horse and greyhound racing industries have a wide geographic spread and to make a valuable contribution to a balanced regional economy. The welfare of horses and greyhounds is a cornerstone of both industries, and I'm assured that HRI and RCE are striving to ensure the highest standards with both industries, making substantial investment in integrity and welfare initiatives. The Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund has played a key role in providing this investment and has been instrumental in shaping the destiny of these industries. Brexit and COVID-19 present unique and substantial threats as we've discussed, to the Irish economy, as we're small and open to a small economy naturally prone to volatility. And it's therefore important and crucial that we support these industries as well, given the challenge of both Brexit and indeed COVID. Supporting both of them, Ceann will protect the jobs and economic benefit derived by individuals involved in the two sports, and that is really important. These jobs also have a significant associated economic benefit, supporting thousands across the country too. So in conclusion, Ceann it has been a pivotal, this funding, in shaping the destiny of both the thoroughbred and greyhound racing industries, and this funding this year is particularly important to it. It's both the equine industry and breeding industry is very competitive at a global level and a beacon for excellence, with us being the third highest producer of thoroughbred foals in the world, and a success story that has been many years and generations in the making, and particularly important that we continue for that reason as well. And the greyhound industry is predominantly a rural industry with a very strong urban support base, and one that's important in our economy as well. So I don't propose to be accepting any of the amendments that are there. I feel that the proposals and what we're bringing forward and the terms and conditions we've attached in terms of the expectation as to how the funding is allocated is appropriate. I recommend and ask for the support of the House here in ensuring that this funding is delivered for the year 2022 to both Roscommon and HRA. Thank you very much, Ceann
Thank you very much, Minister. Item number 10, motion regarding proposed approval by Dáil Eireann of a horse and greyhound racing fund regulations 2021. Must first consider the amendment number 1 in the name of Deputy Matt Carthy. The question is that the amendment be agreed to. Is the amendment agreed?
No, not agreed.
Not agreed. The chocolate are having a tarishkin abadishta. Shifshatana gun abadishnil. The stolen gul butcher and kesh. To believe the question is defeated. Vote all. Insofar as the vote has been demanded, it's postponed until the weekly division time tomorrow evening.